and welcome to the Plane Talking UK podcast. My name is Matt, and in this week's show, there is some worrying reports coming out of Warsaw Airport. Our favourite low-cost airline signs a sustainable fuel deal in Amsterdam, and it looks like batteries and hydrogen are to become a reality under a new group of aviation experts. In the military, 2 unique telemetry aircraft fly against a Russian missile launch, and the Women Air Force service pilots celebrate their 80th anniversary. Oh, that was quite a mouthful. Joining me this week are aviation podcast royalty in the form of the old pilot, Nick, and of course it is Captain Andy from Acme Orange. Welcome, hello, and hello, even.
Hello.
You can tell
hello,
I'm not. You can tell I'm not used to doing the intro, can't you? what gave it away?
Well, at least you made your mic live. Don't worry about it.
Well, yes, absolutely. That makes a change, doesn't it? Never remember to do that. Nick, we'll start with you. How are you?
I'm fair to middling. Thank you very much indeed. You see, I've got a nice haircut.
Absolutely,
look
yes.
at that.
Always fresh, sir. Always fresh.
The summer is nearly here, isn't it? I mean, it comes and goes a bit, but we've had some nice sunshine. No, I'm doing very well, thanks. I'm pretty busy. The lady wife has had part of her undercarriage repaired, so she's got a new knuckle joint in the middle of her folding gear.
Right.
And on one side, so, we're hoping that will be good. She's not getting around too well yet, but I'm having to do everything else in the house. Although, to be fair, she's helping out quite a lot now. So that's good. But, doing 2 people's jobs,
right?
It's quite hard, I find.
Quite, absolutely. Well, a speedy recovery, I'm sure. I'm sure she'll be running rings around you again in no time.
I'm sure she will, exactly.
And another guest that we have with us today helping out. I'll explain where the rest are. We do, as I say, we've got Armando here. Say hello, Armando. or not.
Well, there's an ambulance driving by, so I was going to hold off.
Okay. Okay, all right. We'll come back to Armando in a minute then. Joining us also is Captain Andy. Thank you very much for joining us from Acme Orange, of course.
Hello, yes. Thanks for having me back on again.
A pleasure.
It's always nice to be on the show. It's nice to see Nick as well. I haven't spoken to him in a while. And I'm enjoying Armando's webcam view of the airport. It's brilliant. I did enjoy that ambulance going past. I hope the person's all right.
Well, yes.
Yeah, I'm all good. The world is opening up again.
It was just one of the captains who was late getting to his aeroplane.
Right, yeah. So an efficient way to get on station, yeah, absolutely.
Excellent command skills to commandeer that.
Yeah, like I say, flagging down an ambulance as it goes past, yeah absolutely.
I'm good. I'm busy. I'm very busy at the minute.
Yeah.
I'm back to flying full time now. Yeah, this is day 1 today. Today's been an office day, so I've spent the day working in my office here.
Yeah. And
then tomorrow I'm off to Santorini and then somewhere in Turkey the next 2 days, I think. So yeah, it's all good.
Blimey, never a dull moment in your world then.
No.
Indeed. All right, we'll see if we can cross over to Armando now, who is going to interrupt our wonderful webcam view for a moment.
Oh no, I'm just gonna keep this view right here. Every single one of I cornered about 50 people to sign a release,
right?
A media release. So the same 50 people are just gonna keep walking back and forth from the left to the right, to the left to the right, to the left to the right. Hopefully they don't actually have anywhere to be.
Right. I mean, have we discussed fees involved in this particular enterprise of yours, or?
Well, as soon as I said PTUK, they didn't expect anything. So
fair enough. Yeah, that's probably
production values of this podcast have gone through the roof. If you now have extras,
absolutely. Yeah, live from. So, whereabouts in the world are you, Armando?
So I am in the atrium of the Charlotte Douglas International Airport. I'm flying to Denver to direct flight. I did get bumped up to business class, so it's nice. I'm going over to flight safety for the next 4 days or so for recurrent training. But man, I just got to mind my P's and Q's tonight because I've got two outstanding airline captains on, so I can't make things up like I usually do. So.
Right. Okay. We're trying to keep it above the magic 50% then tonight, are we?
Armando, if only you could hear me shouting at my phone when I'm out on a dog walk and I'm listening to your podcast and you guys come up with some blather.
Right. Okay. I understand there was something that particularly excited you in only the recent episode, Nick.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I immediately put pen to paper and wrote Carlos a rude note saying that if the aircraft pressurization of, what was it, a Fokker, a Virgin in Australia, is 8,000 and it reads 8,300. We don't panic. There's nothing wrong with it. It's fine. and just like the inquiry said, there was absolutely no problem with the aircraft whatsoever. But Carlos seemed intent on telling everyone that there was a fault with the system and the crew did very well to get their airplane down, when actually it was not really a problem at all. But
well, you know,
what more can I say?
We like to over exaggerate and things. Obviously,
we at least are here to 50%. I mean, for heaven's sake.
I would argue that we did our job excellently, because we evoked the emotion of the old man walking his dogs, yelling at his phone. So basically, we're an Oscar-winning movie.
Yeah. This is a win, absolutely.
Yeah, for a moment, I turned into the old curmudgeon.
Right, fuming. Yeah, absolutely. Fair enough. A result then for us. So I just wanted to sort of thank everybody who's joined us in the chat room this evening. Some guy called Carlos Stebbins is in there at the moment. He's supposed to be very busy, so that's quite frustrating. Lee Davis, welcome along. Tony S, Main Man Micah, Masha, Richard Adams, Dirk S, we've got GB's Model Zone and Mazus Karim, all in the chat room. Thank you very much for joining us. It's don't forget, of course, if you do listen to the show, you can listen to the audio version. Anybody listening on that, I should say, can join us by coming to YouTube, going to youtube.com/c/Plane Talking UK. That'll take you straight to the YouTube page where you can come and join us in the chat room and help shape the shape. I did it so much better in rehearsal. Never mind. You can shape the conversation of the show by being in the chat room and keeping all of us on our toes, basically. Well, okay, if everybody's ready, then I'm very conscious of the fact that we haven't got Armando for very long, so we want to try and get on as much as we can. So if everybody is ready, shall we get underway?
No, let's not. Let's just drink beer.
Okay, right, we'll do that as well.
Please turn down the seatbelt light. Please take your seats and fasten your seatbelts.
And we'll start with our first story, which is with Nick, and it's worrying reports that have been coming out of Warsaw Airport over the last day or so.
Is that right? I best I read this and then we can find out more. Well, this comes from Simple Flying for simple pilots and simple people.
That's why we like them.
Warsaw Airport apparently was closed due to threats against aircraft. I don't know, perhaps the old curmudgeon was at the end of the runway shaking his fist.
Fuming, yeah.
So it was on April the 21st when Poland's Warsaw Chopin Airport was temporarily closed after a bomb threat to an Emirates flight from Dubai. EK177 was on approach to Warsaw Chopin Airport when it received a message from air traffic control that it had hazardous material on board, a term we will come back to. The Boeing 777-31H brackets ER for extended range, I think. Registration Alpha 6 Echo November X-ray landed safely at 1940 local time. That was about 40 minutes past 5 UTC, and taxied to a remote part of the... Oh, who said that? Of the airport.
Pardon me,
The
Mrs. Arnold.
Emirates flight was the last to land before the airport was closed for around 2 hours. Lucky they got in just before the airport closed. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. They closed the airport as soon as it landed because
Right.
it was carrying hazardous material.
Okay.
So in that, what it seems incredible, the exchange between ATC and the pilot, which was captured by VAS Aviation and is on YouTube. If you want to listen, a link will be in the show notes. It takes around 6 minutes for the controller to tell the pilot it's a bomb threat. In that 6 minutes, air traffic slowly moves from hazardous material to saying, okay, we have information that the duty officer of the aerodrome has informed you that you have a bomb on board. Significant difference, and I'll quickly explain here. Hazardous material is like something in your cargo that's, has a threat if it breaks open. It might be an acid or something. It should be well packed, but you often have to declare it. You need to know it's on board, and there are certain actions you might need to take.
Well, and also presumably, my concern here also is that if it is hazardous materials, presumably the pilot should have very much been aware of that before they took off.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We get a declaration of hazardous material that's on the aircraft, but it can be quite long. It can be like several pages. So it's not like you get a chance to memorize it.
No.
And he may be confused because when they say you've got hazardous material on board, he goes, well, yeah, I know. I've got like 5 pink sheets here full of all the hazardous material I'm carrying. What are you referring to? What's the problem with it? Because what they really did need to say was there's a bomb threat on your aircraft, because you then immediately start a different set of procedures to that you would take if you were worried about just hazmat in the cargo.
Yeah.
So there we go. Before that, the Emirates pilot seemed unaware of the situation's gravity. Well, I'm not surprised. There was a breakdown in communications here. Around 2 minutes into the exchange, the Emirates pilot agrees to allow a Finnair Embraer to land ahead of him, which is very rare. Emirates giving way to Embraer. Whoa. But of course, when he realizes that as soon as his wheels hit the ground, they're going to close the airport, then you let your mates in,
Right.
So that he wouldn't have to divert, because that would probably be the situation. With the pilot thinking this is about hazardous material, he pushes back, and that doesn't mean he pushes away from the terminal. That means he asks for more information. Who wrote this stuff? When the bomb threat is finally relayed, he said, priority is to get on the ground now. We'll deal with it once we're on the ground. And quite right, he's got a big, long checklist to go through. And if you're halfway across the Atlantic and you get a bomb warning, then you've got time to deal with it. But if you're on right next to an airport, you just really want to get on the ground and evacuate the aircraft.
Okay.
When the Emirates plane is cleared to land, ATC asks how many souls. Well, yeah, that's fair enough. And how much fuel? That's pretty standard. 235 souls and 8 tons of fuel. He replied, and EK177 landed safely and taxied to a remote part of the airport where emergency services attended. And that is perfectly normal. You want to go somewhere where if it goes bang, it doesn't destroy other aircraft or endanger other people. UK, quite often it Stansted. Because that's been nominated as an airport no one cares about. So that's where they want to park aeroplanes with bombs on.
Right.
Of course, if you're flying over Glasgow, you wouldn't go all the way down to Stansted. You go, well, no one cares about Glasgow. Let's land there.
Isn't Prestwick also designated as well? Just go and destroy that.
Oh yeah, there's a Navy base. It used to be anyway at Prestwick. So you park probably in the Navy base. That'd be good. I'd love that.
I was actually going to ask that, Nick. Is that an option to land at military airports that may be more equipped with either bomb disposal or something like that?
Most military airports in the UK don't handle big aircraft very often. So you're probably not going to get a very good service, and quite honestly, the civil procedures probably slicker at most civil airports. Not, denigrating the military, but and they do deal with, of course, bombs all the time. They stick them on airplanes regularly. But no, a bomb threat requires a specific set of procedures, and I don't know if the military are too well clued up on that. So the Emirates aircraft landed safely, and it says here the threat to EK-177 is not an isolated incident involving Warsaw Chopin. On March 20th, the airport was closed after receiving a bomb threat to a Wizz Air flight from somewhere in Georgia to Warsaw. Incoming flights were diverted to Katowice airport, and the alarm turned out to be false. And Aviation 24BE reports said that on April the 20th, Wizz Air flight someone doesn't like Wizz Air, do they? W6-1515 from Chopin to Norway's Oslo Sandefjord diverted to Gdansk airport, where it made an emergency landing. The pilots of the A321, Hotel Alpha, Lima X-Ray Papa, were advised of the bomb threat on board. However, all the passengers and crew were safely evacuated. Gdansk airport was temporarily closed after the emergency landing. There's a fourth incident. So let's just say there have been enough, plenty of incidents. These threats to aircraft arriving or departing Warsaw appear to be a targeted attack, which is perhaps suggesting that these aren't real threats. You can get threats to an aircraft various ways, and I've had them various ways. You can get someone phoning the airport or phoning the airline saying, "I've put a bomb on your aircraft." And if you've got a good airline, almost everyone on the airline has been trained to receive these. So, people can phone almost any number in the airline, and they'll probably get a sensible person taking down the details. And the airline will look at the information that's been passed and make a decision on the threat that this warning gives, because not all warnings, in fact the vast majority of warnings are they're spurious, they're false warnings, and the airline has to make an assessment, and they've got trained bomb assessors or threat assessors who look at the situation and decide whether it's credible or not. And if it's credible, then they usually give the captain the word, and he will divert and get the airplane on the ground. Or if he's about to depart, he won't depart.
So when I was reading this story here, I'm not sure whether it was the Emirates one or whether it was one of the other reports and stuff, or whether it in fact involved all of them. But the method at which the threat was received was through a contact form on one of the airport's websites. Was certainly how one of the threats came in, which
interesting. I hadn't heard of that, but of course. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. It's a bit like sending an email, isn't it?
Yeah, essentially.
So yeah, that would kind of work. I've received a handwritten one on my aircraft in flight, and I've also had one made by a telephone call against an aircraft I was about to take off and fly away with. So you deal with those differently, whether you're on the ground or whether you're in the air, and. In both cases, it was determined that they were green, so they were considered not a credible threat.
Right.
But they do cause a lot of alarm and delays. And in one case, it was because some bloke wanted to get on the flight and thought if he made a bomb threat, the flight would be delayed and he'd have time to get on.
Okay.
Of course, what he ended up with was going to court.
Yes, I can imagine.
It soon worked out who it was.
So I mean, if you get something like this that should happen, for example, in fact, I'd like to ask this to everyone that's here. I mean, in your case, Nick, I mean, you've actually had first-hand experience of this. What goes through your head at that moment when you receive that message? I mean, do you look at it? I mean, is your gut reaction almost to assume that it isn't credible?
No. Your gut action is, we've got a situation we need to deal with here, so
Right.
we'll pull out all the stops, and we've got a bomb threat checklist to go through.
Yep.
We're going to look at that, and it usually requires breaking open, because the actual procedures are confidential. So
Right.
we don't let it hang around. We don't.
Okay.
There are procedures which are in our QRH about how to deal with it if we find a bomb on board. If we decide to move it, where to put it, where it will cause the least amount of damage to the aircraft. But the airline's security procedures are in a sealed envelope, and you have to break that open and run through them. They're usually pretty sensible. They're the sort of things that any experienced pilot would probably think of doing, but they involve ways of handling the aircraft that will possibly prevent a real device from going off.
Right. Okay. Now, Andy, I mean, presumably, obviously, well, all airlines will have procedures in place for such things. I mean, I suppose the first question is have you had first-hand experience of this?
Not first-hand, no. And like Nick said, there could have been any numerous bomb threats to aircraft that I've been in command of, and as it's gone through the system, they've put it down as not applicable green, and I'd never find out about it, because we only find out when it goes to red, and then they'll get in touch.
Okay.
But no, I haven't. And being a short haul pilot as well, I've got the bonus of I have an abundance of airfields around me most of the time, so I can get it on the ground pretty quick if that message ever comes through. Because there's two things really to worry about: is this a pressure sensor bomb? Well, it hasn't gone off yet, so don't climb any higher. And secondly, is it a timer? And I've got plenty of time to get it on the ground pretty sharpish. Well, not plenty of time. Enough airfields to put it on the ground in a short space of time. But yeah, I've never had any first-hand experience, but it is something that we run through in the simulators from time to time.
I mean, I suppose it's something that goes through your mind, I'm sure, is like sort of... Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? I don't have the experience that you guys have. I mean, to me, it just sounds like an absolutely horrendous thing to have to try and deal with.
I'm kind of in the middle between these two guys. We, not flying for a major airline. On the corporate side of the house, our company doesn't have specific procedures, but the National Air Transportation Association, which does on the corporate side, we're all certified as in-flight security coordinators as well as ground security coordinators. And in that, we go through some of the same training that the airline guys go through as far as threat levels and how to respond to some threats. But like Andy is saying, on the corporate side, we have almost complete free reign to get that airplane on the ground wherever. Short strips. I mean, I can, I don't even have to coordinate with a company. I just have to let ATC know where I'm going and get it on the ground. So I think all three of us would probably treat it like anything else that's an in-flight emergency, and it's just, hey, just do what you've been trained to do and handle it like any other abnormal situation that comes up.
There's an interesting question from Dirk in the chat room, who asked if we would tell the passengers if we'd had it, and it depends entirely on the situation. And you're a bit, to a certain extent, with our PAs, they're all pre-written for us, so that obviously you adjust them for your situation, but in some cases you would, in some cases you wouldn't necessarily. So it depends entirely, and I can't really say much more than that. Both cases, we didn't have a device on board. Although we have had devices or items on board that have been assessed as possibly being a threat to the aircraft. And the classic is a mobile phone left in a a pocket. You know very well you can turn a mobile phone into
an incendiary
bomb.
device
Anything
in no
can
time.
be
Yes.
turned into a bomb,
Yeah.
quite honestly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if someone finds a mobile phone, then you go almost sigh, because there's usually one every flight's left on board, and if the security people don't realise and the searchers don't find it, then your new crew comes on, you get airborne, and there's someone delving around in the seat pocket, comes up with a phone and says, "Oh yeah, I found this phone here." And the worst time was when one of the cabin crew girls sauntered into the flight deck in the days before we used to have the locked door and said, "Yeah, passengers found this phone."
Oh no!
And if you've got a suspicious object on board, the last place you take it to is the flight.
It's the flight deck. Yes, it's not an ideal location to take such an item. Yes.
No, we all kind of cringed and dived out the windows. But no, I'm joking. We're at 35,000 feet, so that wouldn't have been
not a good idea. Anyway, a very, very interesting subject. Thank you for your comments on it. We'll move on to the next story now, and as always, story 2 is a Ryanair story. Sky News is where this one comes from, and the headline is: Ryanair signs sustainable fuel deal to cut climate heating emissions from its Amsterdam flights. Budget airline Ryanair hopes to cut pollution from some of its Amsterdam flights by 60% through using sustainable aviation fuel. From this month, 1/3 of the roughly 1,500 flights a year that Ryanair operates from the Amsterdam Schiphol airport will be provided and powered using 40% sustainable fuel derived from used cooking oil. Current regulations restrict the amount of sustainable fuel that can be used in an aircraft to 50%. Using a waste product like used cooking oil means fossil fuels that would have been used to stay in the ground. Can stay in the ground, but these waste residues are a finite resource, environmentalists warn. Ryanair Holdings, the parent company of Buzz, Lauda, Malta Air, and Ryanair DAC, operates more than 2,400 flights a day from 82 airports and already uses some form of sustainable fuel in flights from France, Sweden and Norway. Ryanair Sustainability Director Thomas Fowler said sustainable fuel is a cornerstone of its strategy to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, a widely adopted global goal to cut emissions as much as possible and in theory offset only those that cannot be cut. Flying accounts for around 2.5% of all global emissions of carbon dioxide, a climate heating greenhouse gas. Most jets are powered by kerosene derived from the fossil fuel petroleum. Now, this story makes me a little bit nervous, because especially when they're essentially using cooking oil. Now, if I cast my mind back to about sort of 20 to 25 years, a coach company that I was aware of in this area here in sleepy old Suffolk used to use used cooking oil instead of, or I think it was like a 50-50, a bit like that, with diesel. And to say that it had quite a unique odour, that very essentially wherever these vehicles went, it very much smelt like a fish and chip shop. I mean, I'm hoping that obviously this is going to be a far higher grade fuel that's going in these amazing aircraft, because it also wasn't fantastically good for the engines. I mean, I'm assuming obviously that this many years down the line it'll be a far better sort of source of fuel.
Yeah, I'm a bit worried about the increase in bird strikes, Matt, because of course if your engines smell of fish,
well, quite,
then you're going to be attracting all these seagulls. It's going to be a nightmare.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a jet. I mean, I hadn't thought of that. That's brilliant. I love that. Sorry.
All this sustainable fuel is great, but the key thing is to fly more efficiently in the future as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I was reading a thing today. For every 100 kilos of Jet A1 burnt, it produces 350 kilos of CO2, which is massive.
Right.
And if you can fly at low cost indexes, do do a continuous descent approaches, you can save 20% on that. So that's where we should be starting. Really, this stuff's great, and I think they will have cleaned out all the bits of fish batter and stuff from the cooking oil. I hope so. Anyway,
I hope it's been
What
filtered.
do they call those in Scotland? They used to be able to buy a bag of the little.
scraps.
In the northeast, you can buy a bag of scraps.
Yeah,
that
bag of scraps. Yeah, absolutely.
All
yeah.
the scraps get
Yeah,
stuck
we call
in the
we call them crispies here.
Crispies, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my favourite
Yeah,
part.
It's a good starting point, but I think the push now in aviation is flying efficiently, because that will make a real big difference.
Absolutely. Also, and perhaps I'm being a little bit controversial by saying this, so I apologise in advance. But if flying only represents 2.5% of the overall emission issue, perhaps there are bigger fish to fry. See what I did there? Yeah.
Very good.
Oh, that's awful.
I apologise for nothing. Yeah,
You do have to ask yourself how many people concentrate on the cruise liner industry or the maritime cargo industry.
Yeah.
Some of it which they have appallingly inefficient engines, because these ancient old vessels are plodding around the world. And they're at least as bad as us. But I guess a lot of other people would say, although it's yet to be really given a scientific proof, that we're dumping it in the upper atmosphere. So, that may be a different problem.
Yeah, okay. No, that's fair. As I say, I just can't help but feel that, the aviation industry, I mean, and everybody's got to do their bit. I do get that, but I do feel that, the aviation industry is getting, a bit of a rough ride, if you like, when...
Oh, we do. We're
we
a
always
good
get it in
whipping
the neck.
horse.
Yeah.
But Andy's quite right. I mean, the advances that we've made in the technology of both the engines and fuel efficiency and the way we conduct the flights has been incredible, and we're really motivated from the pilots through the air traffic controllers back to the manufacturers to find ways of cutting it down to an absolute minimum. We understand that we've got a finite resource, but we want the industry to keep going until we can develop something that can replace carbon fuels.
Absolutely. And we'll move on to the next story, if we may, Andy. We're sort of sticking with the same subject, really, here, and it's looking at a possible alternative or a potential solution, perhaps.
Yeah, so this comes from a website that I really love, gov.uk. This is planes running on batteries and hydrogen to become a reality under a new group of aviation experts. A new group of aviation experts across industry and government will work together to make zero-emission flight a reality. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps and Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng have today, this was on the 20th, set out a new group of aviation experts across industry and government who will work together to make zero-emissions flight a reality. Well, that's just saying the same thing. As world leaders in aviation decarbonise, the new Zero-Emission Flight, ZEF, delivery group will further Britain's role in the global effort to end flight emissions. Launched at the 5th meeting of the Jet Zero Council, the new steering group will help position the UK at the forefront of the global shift to green aviation by supporting the development of zero-emission aircraft and airport infrastructure. It will also look at how the law needs to adapt so that sustainable flying can truly become a reality. The new group will sit under the Jet Zero Council, which is an advisory forum with experts from across the industry. There's a lot of experts involved in this, and will focus specifically on the technology, infrastructure, and regulation needed to make zero-emission flight a reality. Speaking at the 5th Jet Zero Council meeting today, the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps said, "From the first jet engine created here in the UK, Britain is truly a world leader in flying. Now we're determined to revolutionise flying, and we want to see everyone have the opportunity to travel guilt-free. We're determined to bring forward the flight technology of the future, and through our new Zero Emissions Flight Delivery Group, we will help create thousands of jobs around the country and take another step towards zero emissions flights." The new group will be led by aviation expert Rachel Gardner-Poole, who joined with over 20 years of experience in military and commercial aviation, both in the public and private sector. Currently, the Chief Operating Officer for the Connected Places Catapult, Rachel has previously worked at the Civil Aviation Authority, the UK Space Agency, and IBM. Under Rachel's leadership, the ZEF Delivery Group will build on the progress made through the Aerospace Technologies Institute's Fly Zero project and the Department for Transport Zero Emissions Flight Infrastructure project. Zero Emissions Flight Delivery Group Chair Rachel Gardner-Poole said, "It's a great privilege to be asked to be the chair of the ZEF Delivery Group, and I'm committed to the critical work ahead to make zero emissions in aviation a reality. I am passionate about using innovative technology and to create a positive impact on our planet and look forward to collectively addressing the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead of us." The government is investing in aerospace R&D through the ATI programme, and £685 million will be provided over the next 3 years, which was announced in March by the Business Secretary. In addition, the government is providing £125 million, matched by a further included with another £175 million from industry, of support for Innovate UK's Future Flight Challenge. And the challenge will be shortly announcing projects successful in its third round of funding competition, including those advancing electrical flight technologies that will support the operation of sub-regional aircraft and the UK in reaching its net zero target. So essentially this story is we've set up a bunch of experts to talk about it.
Yeah, great.
That'll help.
Sub-regional.
I have no idea.
No, I don't know what sub-regional aircraft are, but I'm supposing an aircraft that can't even get out of its own region.
I mean, unless they mean, is that an alternative word that they're using for what I call like domestic?
Or is it even smaller than an ATR and Dash 8? Smaller than that.
Well, as we've seen from most projects that are producing battery-driven aircraft, their endurance means they can't really go very far. So they wouldn't get out of your county, most of them. I mean, so I think that might be what they're referring to.
I mean, one of the fascinating things about the talk that Neil Cloughley gave at the 400th was actually that whole concept of it, like the ability of building essentially an electric aircraft, but that you could change the power unit, if you see what I mean, as the technology progresses and gets better. So you could essentially run it with a small generator essentially until the technology improves and gets the battery power or the batteries in general improve.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking about when Andy was reading this. This is just another government regulatory agency that Neil Cloughley has to go through now.
Yeah, true.
And probably all the work that he's done with the legacy agency now he has to do with this agency. But yeah, you're exactly right, Matt. The folks over at Faraday are getting around the battery problem by just using an APU.
Yeah,
using an APU to generate electrical power at a tenth of what it would normally
cost you to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the emissions.
An
and
APU, you're looking at 120 kilos an hour, something like that.
Yeah,
exactly.
Not much at all, is it?
Yep, that's it.
Indeed.
I think this industry is still, this part of the industry is still very young, and I think we're going to see a lot of developments in the coming years and hopefully months.
I mean, you could say the same about electric cars, couldn't you? I mean, you think really, I mean, they've got the range to around about 300 miles now before it needs a full charge and that, it's starting to get to a range now where they are useful, if you see what I mean. I mean, obviously some of the earlier ones where they'll only do sort of 150 miles. I mean, I remember talking to somebody who did have one who used to refer to something known as range anxiety, because it's a bit like when you're driving your car. And I mean, that's certainly, if you're flying an aeroplane, the last thing you want to be worrying about is how much power you've got left.
Just keep climbing higher, then glide the rest of the way.
Right, okay. That's always an option. Okay, we'll move on. And Armando, you've got an interesting story that had took place in, I think this is Washington, wasn't it?
Yeah, this was nice and embarrassing for U.S. Aviation and the FAA and everybody involved. But this particular story came from thedrive.com. This made its way over the whole aviation channels on social media and everything. But the U.S. Capitol Police briefly ordered an evacuation of the Capitol building various associated office building, the U.S. Library of Congress, the U.S. Botanic Garden. This
What?
week over...
They evacuated the Botanic Gardens? Oh, no!
Unbelievable, isn't it? Of all the federal buildings in Washington, D.C., the Botanic Garden said, we may be a possible target.
Right.
Fantastic.
Very serious.
Right. Continuing on. So this was done because there was an aircraft that, quote, posed a probable threat. There are unconfirmed reports that some kind of miscommunication happened that, as you can see on your screen there, it eventually found that it was the U.S. Army Twin Otter aircraft carrying the members of the Golden Knights parachute team dropping into a baseball game at the Washington Nationals baseball park. This obviously triggered the alert. There is a parachutist falling from the sky.
When has a twatter ever had any form of threat to it?
Right?
Well, if you're standing underneath it, you want to be careful.
This apparently happened around 6:30 p.m. The U.S. Capitol Police issued a statement that the Capitol was being evacuated out of an overabundance of caution that evening, and that 18 minutes later they deemed there was no actual threat. Now, if anybody's been to Washington D.C., it's like 25 square miles. It's like 5 miles by 5 miles. It's the tiniest. So there must have been a massive breakdown in communication, because an aircraft or a Twin Otter orbiting over a baseball park is going to cover most of Washington, D.C. And so, I don't know, this was all over the Flight Radar 24 sites, this was and associated ADS-B sites. People were tracking this aircraft. I think most aviation enthusiasts understood that, oh yeah, this is the U.S. Army Golden Knights. Who didn't understand it was the U.S. Capitol Police. I mean, this was coordinated with the FAA. Whatever happened, it just didn't get to the the capital of the United States. So yeah, there you go.
A bit of miscommunication, I
brilliant.
think.
Yeah. I'd love to see the Golden Rain knighting out of that twatter. The Golden Knights raining out of that twatter. That would have been quite a sight.
Well, there we go.
At night.
There you go.
Right. I don't know how to follow that up.
There goes the PG rating. That's all I can say to that.
From the catacombs of Nick Anderson's mind.
Absolutely. On the subject of Nick, you have our next story, and we're off to Manchester initially.
So it appears. Somewhere I rarely go, although the Manchester Aviation Society want me up there for another talk. More fool them.
It's a place where I go daily, Nick.
Do you? Oh, wow.
Yes.
How wonderful for you. So this is from UK Aviation News. Direct Manchester to Toronto service set to resume. Wow, this fantastic story. Who got hold of this one?
Me, be nice. All right, I'm not used to doing the show notes, I'm afraid. So you'll so I'm finding stories that I think, oh, that looks interesting to me.
So good
mainly
for you, old chap.
because Toronto is one of the few places I wanted to go. I don't know why I choose to go from Manchester, but anyway, there we go.
Fair, yeah, okay, I can understand that.
I apologise.
Anyway, Air Canada said that it
apologise.
will be restarting its direct Manchester-Toronto service from the 1st of June. Flight will operate 5 times a week, leaving Manchester Airport at 12:15 and arriving Toronto 14:55 local time. So it only takes nearly 3 hours to get there. That's pretty clever. It'll be operated by the mighty Airbus A330, of which I think that's one behind me, or it might be a 340. I can never tell. Stephen Gerrard, Air Canada's General Manager of Sales UK and Ireland, described the move as exciting times. Our non-stop flight. Well, there's not many places to stop, actually, between Manchester and Toronto, but I suppose you would pop into Iceland if you wanted. Anyway, they will provide their customers in the northwest of England with a direct link to Canada and beyond. We look forward to welcoming our customers back on board. The airport's interim manager, because they fired the last one, said the service to Toronto is fantastic news for companies large and small across the north who do business with Canada, and also for tourism and those visiting friends and family. It's also great to see the carrier return with its mainline service offering high-quality product with business and premium economy classes. Passengers using the service will be able to connect to Air Canada's enormous network across Canada. There's only like 3 places to go in Canada anyway. And to another 46 US airports. More news from Manchester. The Manchester airport is to fully reopen Terminal 3 from today. So if you do get a ticket that says Terminal 3, you can believe them now. They're set to fully reopen it to cope with the growing demand for air travel, which they've suddenly discovered. Following as the effects of the pandemic ease. The terminal, which was closed at the beginning of the pandemic when air travel fell off a cliff, along with all the lemmings, has been partly open since 27th of March, but from Friday, passengers flying with Urgani, what's that one called, Andy?
Aurigny.
Aurigny. Why has it got a G in it?
That's the
exactly what I was
Islands.
going to say.
Yeah. British Airways, Eastern Airways, Iberia Express, Logan Air. God, they're still going. Ryanair and Vueling should check in Terminal 3. Range of outlets in the terminal would be available from the 22nd. TravelX, Cafe Nero, Boots, Costa, duty free. This is fantastic. I'm so glad you invited me on tonight, Matt. WH Smith's, duty free, Lion and Antelope, Pork and Pickle, KFC, Nook and Kiosco. Anyway, although COVID restrictions are being eased, the airport is reminding passengers that they're likely to face many hours of queues. To still check the advice for the country they're travelling to in order to make sure they have the right jabs and forms and checks and tests and stuff. Passengers with specific queries about their flight should contact the airline directly.
I think what we've just discovered is after a lengthy and honorable career in aviation and as an airline captain, Nick is fully qualified to be the guy that makes the announcements in the airport. Like, if for your shopping convenience, we have the duty free, the Lion and Antelope, and the Pork and Pickle.
Absolutely.
Just don't get them to announce Aurigny flights. Otherwise, people won't get on them.
They don't pay me enough to do that.
I'm very happy about this news because it means all of these airlines are getting out of my terminal.
Right.
Going back to where they belong.
Right. Fair enough.
Especially Origny.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all right if you're not trying to pronounce it.
Seriously, where does that airline come from?
The
What
Channel
language
Islands.
is that?
It's the Channel Islands.
They speak a different language in the Channel Islands? Good
I
lord.
don't know if it's a mix with French and English and all that.
Possibly. Oh, well, I'll probably get a rude letter from someone now who lives in the Channel Islands.
No, all good. If it's not in the chat room, I wouldn't worry about it. We're going to move on then. Andy, you're next with the BBC on this one, and we're talking Emirates again here.
Yes, as you said, this is from the BBC, and Emirates have said they will keep flying to Russia unless its owner stops it. Emirates boss say the airline will keep flying to Russia unless its owner, the Dubai government, tells it not to. If we're told to stop, we will stop. Unless we are told otherwise, we will continue, Sir Tim Clark told the BBC. Most major international airlines pulled out of Russia amid sweeping sanctions imposed by Western countries since the war began in Ukraine. But Emirates is one of the few carriers that is still operating flights to Moscow and St. Petersburg. When asked if the airline would reconsider its position, Emirates President Sir Tim said that it was not his call, but a decision that the UAE government would take. As well as carrying passengers, the airline also transport cargo, including humanitarian goods, food and medical supplies, which are not on the sanctions list. Sir Tim added that it was important to recognise the Russian population may not be part of the war in Ukraine, and that the diplomatic corps of other countries who have missions in Moscow need to be able to function by moving in and out of the country. He said, "We are catering to people who are on the periphery of the main issues here, and that is probably the way the UAE government looks at it." The United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia have rejected calls from Western governments to impose sanctions on Russia. Abu Dhabi has also not severed economic ties with Moscow. It was one of only 3 countries, along with China and India, to abstain in the United Nations Security Council vote in February to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It also abstained in the General Assembly vote on the 7th of April to suspend Russia from the UN Human Rights Council. Since the outbreak of the war, Moscow has faced a barrage of unprecedented sanctions, including bans on Russian aircraft using airspace and airports in the US, the EU, the UK, and Canada. International flights by Russian airlines have been severely curtailed due to the sanctions. National carrier Aeroflot has suspended all international flights except for its service to the Belarusian capital Minsk due to the sanctions.
I wonder how many Minsk flights they're putting on a day. Got all these
15,
airplanes
20.
around.
Yeah, indeed. The main reason for me including this story is actually I don't know why, but I sort of, I don't know. It took me a little bit by surprise, if you like. That obviously. I guess it's my fault here, really, perhaps not having received all the information, if you like, about what's going on. I was just genuinely quite surprised to discover that some flights were still going in and out, if you like, outside of internally, if that makes sense.
Well, not all of the world is against Russia. No,
that's fair. Yeah, that is fair. We'll probably move on before I end up in trouble. Anyway, if we Armando, we're off to and the next source is where everybody goes for their aviation news, obviously, which is the Daily Mirror.
Oh yeah, even at the checkout here at the grocery stores in the U.S., we get the Daily Mirror.
Oh, do you? Oh, I am sorry.
It is where I go for all of my aviation news. But,
of course, absolutely. Especially military. They're very good at that.
Yeah. EasyJet. This is an EasyJet story. Thanks for that. They apparently suffered an 11-hour nightmare after their flight returned straight to the UK. Some holiday makers, desperate for some sun, flew all the way to Madeira from Bristol, only to be brought straight back again. The EasyJet flight took off from the West Country city on Monday and headed to the Portuguese archipelago. Thank you for adding that. Which is then it then circled twice before stopping for fuel at another airport. Not a single passenger was allowed to get off that airplane before it was flown back to the UK, according to the Bristol Post. So apparently, when they arrived back in Bristol after this 11-hour flight that got them nowhere, the passengers described a chaotic scene as everyone was left waiting for almost 3 hours before they were told what would happen next. Those on board the flight ended up being bused to Gatwick and checked into a hotel as the clock neared midnight. The passengers were told that they had to get themselves to the check-in at 5 a.m. the following morning and make a second attempt at starting their holiday. EasyJet, of course, apologized for the huge delay and said that high winds at the airport meant that the flight was canceled while the passengers were still on it. That's interesting. Those on board have now, as of the writing of this, arrived at Cristiano Ronaldo Airport on the Madeiran Island around 24 hours later than originally planned. Some of the passengers said that the best thing about the experience was that the passengers developed a great camaraderie in the face of a deteriorating situation. They told us that the wind speed at Funchal was too high to land, but then we stacked up in a queue twice and other planes made it down, according to one passenger.
So, I mean,
I wonder.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, we don't really need to sort of cover too much more on that. Really, my interest in this story, especially with the people that were here, is that a common thing where an airport's essentially, once you've been cleared to take off, the arriving airport can still be closed when you're mid route?
Yes, it happened to me this weekend.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was flying down to Dubrovnik. Airborne, the wind in Dubrovnik was well outside of crosswind limits. So I keyed up the company. I said, look, we might not get in. Here's the plan. I'll go to Split. And Split was windy.
Right.
But it was nearly down the strip. So we went down to Dubrovnik. I took a couple of extra tons of fuel, sat in the hold for 40 minutes as the weather got worse and worse and worse. I thought, well, I'm not going to get in here. And I kept the passengers up to date the whole way. I told them once we were on our way that the winds changed, we might not get in. Then we flew to Split, which was sporty, shall we say. It took quite a bit of work to get that in there. Then we got to Split, and the weather in Dubrovnik was not plan to change at all for the next 24 hours. So what they actually did was took the passengers off in Split, bussed them the 6 hours to Dubrovnik.
Oh my gosh.
Put us in a hotel, then in the morning bussed the passengers from Dubrovnik up to Split, and then we took them home. So it does happen. It's just the unfortunate environment of aviation. Now, Madeira is particularly finicky when it comes to winds, because the wind in each segment, so it's not just one wind that you're looking at. You're looking at a wind off one end of the runway, off the other, down a valley. All of those have to be within limits. And if they're not within the specific limits, you cannot attempt a landing at all. And even if it was inside some of those limits, as says here that, other aircraft made it in, well, they might have got in a very small window where the wind was bang on where it needed to be. And then when these guys came in to have a go, it was out of limits again. So unfortunately, that's just the way it goes sometimes.
Yeah, this is a thing, and I presume again similar sort of problem in the States, Armando. Is it where they're I mean, it's tornado season, isn't it? Especially in Texas and around that sort of area at the moment. I mean, it must be a very common issue.
Yeah, sure. I think what Andy said is pretty. It transfers across the ocean, at least for the airlines. I'll always offer up a little bit different viewpoint from the corporate side of the house. We have some different rules, so we can kind of pick and choose. Depending on if we're carrying passengers, if we're not carrying passengers. Sometimes we're flying under, here in the U.S., Part 91, just an empty, it's just a crew on board, unless it's a revenue generating flight, which is a Part 135 flight, but it could also be just an owner, which is a Part 91 flight. And each of those things has different weather minimums, different restrictions, different takeoff and arrival requirements. As well as our aircraft are not as well equipped as these guys' aircraft, right? So we don't have autoland. In the best equipped aircraft that at least I fly on the corporate side of the house, the best thing we can do is a Cat 2 approach. And so when you're talking about weather minimums changing or weather changing and having a divert plan, we're just a little bit more flexible, I guess, in kind of the rules that you can pick and choose to take off or not take off to go into an airport. But then our passengers, as corporate or private passengers, are generally pretty flexible and understanding. If you say, hey, we're going to go land, for example, winds, I'm going to go land at an airport that's 10 miles away. It's going to take us an extra 45 minutes to get you a taxi, but we'll get you there. I only have to deal at the most with 14 people, right? Unlike Nick and Andy, I don't have 100, 200, and 300 people to worry about. My passengers are all going to be pretty flexible and understanding as far as diverts and delays and things like that. Plus, they're usually used to it.
So, I mean, Nick, from a sort of long haul perspective here, I mean, I know, for example, flights always have far more fuel on board than they need. But if for example, for whatever reason you're flying into the States, for example, and you can't land because because of high winds or whatever, I mean, is there? I mean, I know there's a lot of airfields in the US, obviously, but obviously a bit like here, I guess certain ones can't take. There's a limit to the size of the aircraft that some of the smaller airfields, for example, can take. I mean, I know a large part of this is to do with planning. But it's basically all to do with planning, Matt. And to be truthful, in the second half of my career, we very rarely carried any spare fuel. Really? You just can't afford to carry fuel around just because. You've got to have a good reason, and wind forecast is a good reason. And the fact is that it depends on the type of weather. But if the UK is classic, most runways point east-west. So when you get a north-south wind, there's an awful lot of airfields that will be taken out by that, because you can't divert if the wind's going to be just as much as a problem on another airfield. You've got to find an airfield that is going to have an interwind runway, can take your aircraft, and all that happens at the planning stage, bearing in mind that one airport, when it comes to reality, might be chocker full of people who've diverted to it. So you go, all right, we can't get into Heathrow, let's turn up and divert to blah blah. And they go, well, we can't take you.
and you
Yeah.
then you start having to work for your living.
Yeah.
So a good captain, as soon as you look at the conditions that are likely to be in the area where you're going to land, you start planning ahead and thinking about where you might go, and putting fuel on if you think it's necessary. But we don't carry it as a matter of course.
And is that decision predominantly up? I mean, obviously the company would rather you be as light as possible, but if you make the decision that you need more fuel, there's no fight on your hands, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, 25 years of putting fuel on when I needed, and sometimes taking cargo off to get fuel on, or even leaving passengers behind to get fuel on. I never got any pushback from the company.
That's same for me, Nick. Never.
Yeah.
And just to answer Neil Lamwarn's question, Porto Santo is an option, which is next door, but it only has around 5 parking spaces for an A320 size aircraft. So you can get in there and get some fuel, but they won't let you stay. So then you've got to go somewhere else.
Right. Okay. But I suppose at least you could take fuel on board if you needed to. I guess that's the.
Yeah. I mean, you could. Tenerife is often alternate for down there, and it doesn't say where they actually went to top back up with fuel. It was probably on the mainland somewhere. But again, it all depends on the crew as well. What hours they've got. What's the best option for the company, for the aircraft to be in the right place. I know it's a real pain for the passengers, but there's all these other things in the background as well.
Indeed. Okay. Thanks for your comments on that. Now we have to say goodbye to Armando. Unfortunately, he's got to step off and go and do some actual flying.
It was so nice being on a show when there were no Americans. But, I'm only joking.
Well,
lovely to see you, Armando.
Here you go. You get that back now, Nick. So
Just
actually,
the Brits now.
Yeah, I would much rather. As much as I love doing the podcast, I would love to sit around with the 3 of you guys and around a table at a pub and tell war stories.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's do it sometime.
Amen to that. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Armando. Safe flight, and we'll see you very soon.
Bye.
Take care.
All right, we'll see you. Bye.
Cool. Okay, we'll move on to the next story now, and it's a concept, I think is the best way to describe this. Airbus are trying out some new wings, Nick.
This is fascinating, actually. I had heard of some tricks that are being tried by various companies, and Airbus seems to be one of the ones that are putting a lot of effort in this. So this is from aerospace-testing-international.com, and is talking about Airbus completing wind tunnel tests of Albatross-inspired wings. So they've completed the testing of its E-Extra performance wing demonstrator, which features a new design inspired by bird wings to improve efficiency and reduce CO2 emissions from flight. I'm assuming it's pronounced E-Extra as opposed to just extra.
I think so, isn't it?
Yeah. Performance Wing project was launched last September, takes inspiration from nature to improve wing aerodynamics. You think there's nothing new in aviation, all of a sudden they come up with something like this.
Absolutely.
And performance that's intended to be compatible with any future aircraft configuration and propulsion system. Tips of the extra performance wing: use semi-aeroelastic hinges to reduce drag and overall wing weight whilst combating the effects of turbulence and wing gusts. And it doesn't quite explain how it looks, but you just have to imagine a Phantom or a Buccaneer with folding wings. Well, these wings on this Airbus wing flap around as if you just disconnected them. They were just hinging up and down. Very impressive. Oliver Family, the head of Extra Performance Wing UK for Airbus, said the scale demonstrator, and a very pretty little airplane model it is, integrate and fly breakthrough wing technologies using a remote-controlled Cessna Citation 7 business jet platform in represented flight conditions. And they also glue these wings on the side of a van and drive it up and down a road. I noted. The partially 3D printed wind tunnel model, expertly built by the aerodynamics team at Airbus Low Speed Wind Tunnel Facility in Bristol, is a scaled down version of the Cessna jet, incorporating the lightweight long span design of the extra performance wing that will provide the emissions benefit we're striving for. Initially introduced at a smaller scale through another Airbus project, Albatross 1, which tested semi-aeroelastic hinged wings that, like the seabird, unlock during flight when experiencing wind gusts or turbulence. The extra performance wing will also examine onboard technologies like gust sensors, pop-up spoilers, and multifunctional trailing edges to enable the active control of the wing. Airbus state-of-the-art low-speed wind tunnel is a fantastic way to validate our concepts before flight tests and family. And our computational aerodynamics analysis capability is world-class, and the wind tunnel provides another valuable way to measure the performance and capabilities of the aircraft before flight testing. I wish these people would realise that they kind of lose the audience when they just pile all these long words one after the other. But there you go. Technologies we've tested at the Filton Bristol wind tunnel, mainly inspired by biomimicry, so copying the birds, will now be rapidly integrated for flight testing. So the wind tunnel replicates conditions similar to aircraft takeoff and landing wind speeds, but it's also used by external organizations like F1 cars, etc.
It's absolutely fascinating, isn't it? I mean, I was desperately trying to find a video of this.
Well, there is one.
Oh, is there?
I've got one right here.
Oh, have you? Oh, okay. All right.
If you just go for Albatross 1.
Okay. Yeah.
It's at airbus.com, and then it's a address with there.
Okay.
And anyway, I saw this, and they show the various types of testing, but basically the end third of the wing seems to be able to fly freely and flap up and down as the aircraft goes. Bearing in mind that you only really need the full span of the wing when you want to try and drag every bit of lift out of the wing, and that's mainly for takeoff and landing. When you're in the cruise, you should have an excess of lift because you're up there belting along a decent speed, and the majority of lift comes from the main portion of the wing. Down towards the wing tips, the amount of lift tapers off. In fact, because of the swept wing design of most modern airliners, we already wash out the angle that the wing is presented to the relative airflow to prevent tip stalling. This takes it one step further and allows the whole end of the wing to hinge upwards when you're in one of these situations they describe, like you're in turbulence or you are I don't know, what else did they say, in turbulence, and
wind gusts was the other thing, Nick.
Yeah. So a rigid wing will transfer all that force down the spar into the fuselage and move the fuselage up and down. If you can stop it doing that by just letting the end of the wings flap up and down, that's pretty good. It also reduces the loads on the wing root so that you extend the life of the wing and the spar, which is absolutely brilliant. And they say it also helps avoid tip stalling, which is great because it'll probably reduce span-wise flow. And so, it looks weird. I mean, I suppose the 777X, which is supposed to have folding wings, all they need to do is disconnect the hydraulics, so they've already got it. But I don't know whether we see it on an actual airplane. I think the passengers might be a little bit disconcerted by watching a lot of their wings flapping up and down. What do you reckon, Andy?
Andy, are you there? Sorry.
You got any thoughts, Andy? Andy's died.
Oh dear.
He seems to be very still.
Oh
but
dear.
This is we're watching the video now.
Yeah. It's absolutely good shout on this video. It's absolutely fascinating. The whole, as I say, it's just as I say. So essentially, it's the end that's sort of like kind of folding up, isn't it? So it's sort of and
which is kind of what birds do.
Yeah.
You need to stop me from taking over the screen. Oh no, you've still got it.
Yeah,
there.
I've still got it. Yeah, sorry, carry on.
Yeah. So the wingtip feathers on the birds, when they hit a gust or they need to produce a lot of lift, they do tip up at the wingtips, rather more smoothly than this. But it's the same concept, because you don't want that upward force being transmitted all the way down the wing if you can avoid it. If you can just let the tips flap up and down, well, there you go.
As you say, you think that all innovations have been achieved, and very much not the case.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I'd be interested to see what the maintenance interval on a connection like that is.
I think you just ignore it until they fall off, then you stick a new one on.
Right. Okay. Good. Lovely.
So you just take that you take that asymmetric lift for the rest of the flight, get it back on the ground.
Yeah.
Take it up bottom.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, they will obviously have problems with control surfaces, because you couldn't put ailerons on that wingtip. So you'd have to have the ailerons moved inboard, which reduces their effectiveness, and you're going to have more clever control surfaces. You might even need an all-moving trailing edge to give you a good combination of roll and lift devices.
Right. Yeah.
Well, it'll be interesting to see where it goes. I mean, they've got the wing and the wind tunnel, or the whole aircraft. They were whizzing a big contraption around and around in circles with the model upside down. So don't get confused, folks. They're not going to fly the airplane upside down, but it's quite common for wind tunnel models to be mounted upside down. It's often easier to just ergonomically to do that.
Well, I suppose to put all the joints and stuff on under stress as well, isn't it? To sort of make sure that it doesn't snap just because it's going the wrong way and things like that.
I'm very interested in multifunctional trailing edges, as they've put on here. I think there's a lot of technology that can be built in there and save fuel.
Absolutely. I'm really kind of surprised that the civil sector hasn't followed the military sector, which has had multifunctional surfaces on their wings for years. Look at the F-18, how old that is. Most of them are being scrapped now.
Yeah.
But all the control surfaces on the entire aircraft could move independently at any time to achieve whatever the pilot wanted. And why you haven't got that on a civil airliner, there's absolutely no reason with fly-by-wire you can't do that. You could have the entire trailing edge of the wing helping to roll the aircraft, or all moving down, as to a certain extent they do anyway with trailing ailerons. When you put the flaps down, the ailerons move down a bit as well to help generate lift. I'd like to see a combination of all moving tailplanes that move independently to help provide yaw and twisting moments. There's so many things that you could do that might improve the ride on the aircraft as well as the efficiency.
So, I mean, is it possibly just simple as there's the military is more willing to innovate, perhaps, as where in the commercial world, if it's not broken too much, why bother fixing it? If you see what I mean, I suppose you could argue that the existing model has worked well for as long as it has. Is that reason enough not to sort of invest heavily in these new technologies?
You just have to remember the pushback against fly-by-wire when Airbus came out with the A320, Matt.
Yeah.
I mean, there were an awful lot of stick in the muds there who thought it was the most awful idea. Side sticks, people still go, I'd never fly with a side stick, and I'm going, why not? I mean, that huge, great big control column you've got in a big aircraft that actually just goes to a computer. It doesn't go to anywhere else.
You're not driving the hydraulics directly through that control panel.
Exactly. You haven't got 40 yards of steel cable to move anymore.
No.
So
indeed,
that's true. But you're right. There's an awful lot of inertia that needs to be pushed through.
Moved,
People don't like change.
No, indeed.
The civil world don't need to have the most up-to-date, top-of-the-range fighter jets either.
That's very true. But like you said, we're striving for efficiency, and if this technology or similar military technology can improve efficiency, then we definitely need it.
I suppose if you're in the air, of course, it means less drag, doesn't it? If you're able to shorten the, again, it's that whole making it more efficient, using less fuel to do the same amount of speed, because you've changed the dynamics literally. Anyway, we could go on about that for ages. That's a fascinating subject, really interesting. Looking forward to developments on that. We'll go back to airports now. This is in the Telegraph, this particular story, and I think this is the government trying to solve a problem that has appeared sort of post-COVID with airport staff, and they're going to be relaxing the vetting rules to try and ease the travel chaos. Ministers are to make legal changes allowing staff to be trained without security clearance. Now, I find this very, very worrying, but we'll discuss that in a moment. Airports and airlines will be allowed to relax background counter-terror checks on staff as ministers scramble to prevent months of travel chaos triggered by a shortage of airport workers. Companies will be permitted to train staff before their security vetting is completed under proposals put forward by the Aviation Minister Robert Courts. Proposals to streamline background vetting come amid delays to the process that are making it harder for companies to combat a severe labour shortage. In a leaked letter to the chief executives of airlines, airports and ground handling companies, Mr. Courts said that he will bring forward legal changes within weeks that will allow training to take place more quickly. Although they can be trained, staff will not be allowed to work in so-called airside part of an airport with access to planes and runways until security clearance is complete. He blamed legacy EU rules for causing the problem in the first place and said it cannot be dealt with until legislation is changed. Mr. Courts said as the law on background checks was retained after the European Union exit, ministers do not have the powers to alleviate as they would do under other categories of aviation security regulation. More than 1,300 flights have been cancelled since the start of the Easter holidays as airports and airlines suffered from severe lack of staff. Surging passenger numbers have led to hours-long queues snaking out of airport terminal buildings and scuffles at security checkpoints. Mr. Courts said the government must first seek authority from Parliament to change the law. He and Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, have already laid the groundwork to complete the change in expedited fashion, and he intends to bring it before Parliament before the end of April. So, I mean, I suppose good news in there, but is that they're not going to be allowed airside essentially until the checks have been completed. Now, my personal feel on this is, and I may be wrong, please correct me, but I do feel that whilst I was furloughed at 80% for I don't know how long and all that kind of thing, I do feel that the aviation sector received very little help in terms of like when the pandemic sort of first hit and stuff. And I do wonder if perhaps if there had been more help to sort of retain staff and things like that, but whether perhaps this existing problem or the problem that we have in front of us now would not exist.
Retain staff and also make it easier to get them back to work would be the big thing.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Okay, they can go through all the training, which is great, and I'm sure that the security sensitive stuff, they won't get any form of that training until they have passed all the background checks. And there's absolutely no way you can get airside without, because normally we carry airline employees carry two IDs, their company one and their airport one. And you need at least one of those to get airside, and you need both of them you have to be security checked. So you're not getting airside without them.
No.
So that's
it was hard enough getting your IDs renewed.
In
well before the pandemic.
Yeah.
But of course, not only probably are the ID staff reduced in number and by the pandemic, and also fact they've left their jobs, but there's a huge rush of people trying to get IDs and get security clearances, etc., all in very short order. It doesn't work. You've got to plan ahead for these things, and that's been one of the problems. People have been reluctant to pull the trigger and get staff in place ahead of when you expect them to arrive.
It's very easy to shut it all down. It's very difficult to start it all again.
Yeah,
absolutely.
and they were warned, of course,
Yeah, of
by
course.
the unions and by people who know.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem to make a lot of difference.
No, indeed. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll move on to the last story then in the commercial, if we may. And this one sort of appeared quite late, sort of quite early doors this morning, actually. I stumbled across this particular one, and I was very surprised by this. But Nick, you were sort of saying this is very much sort of almost part of the course, but we'll go into details in that in a moment.
Yeah, so it's from australianaviation.com.au, and this is Qantas crew sleep across seats in front of passengers. And have you got photos for this as well, Matt?
I think I have, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so new images obtained by Australian Aviation show how the cabin crew of a Qantas A330 were made to sleep across seats in the economy cabin alongside passengers with a makeshift blanket overhead to block out the light. The photos, which have been verified, were taken on a long-haul flight from Brisbane to LA and come as the airline faces thousands of customer complaints over long call wait times and queues at airports. Australian Aviation understands that this issue arose in part due to a mechanical problem that meant the lights in the cabin could not be dimmed at the time, which meant the crew had to place blankets over the seats in order to shut out the light. COVID-related supply issues also meant that the privacy curtain that would normally separate the resting crew from paying passengers on the flight has yet to be delivered. In light of extending the range of its A330 fleet, Qantas has had to redesign the areas designated for its crew to rest and take breaks while mid-flight on all the aircraft that they will utilise with the extended range. Generally, on the Airbus A330, the official crew rest areas are set aside for the 4 pilots on board, while cabin crew are often assigned designated areas in the passenger cabin to take breaks. While under standard A330 operations, crew can sit in a traditional economy seat during their break, under the extended range operations, aviation fatigue management rules dictate that the crew are required to have a lie-flat option during their rest or time on board. As such, crew are now provided with mattresses to place over a bank of 4 economy seats, allowing them to lie down. Under normal circumstances, a privacy curtain will be installed around these seats. In the meantime, crew will continue to take their breaks across the centre bank of economy seats beside the passengers. And then it goes on to say that this is causing tension between cabin crews and unions and Qantas, etc. Yeah,
indeed. Now, I mean, when I first read this story, part of me sort of thought I'm not even sure that's legal. I don't know how. Mind you,
it's legal.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, it was if you don't have a designated crew rest area, and the aircraft is quite capable of providing one, but the airline has to pay for it and have it fitted,
right.
Then you're allowed to take rest in passenger seats, but they have to be curtained off. So to give you privacy, and the quality of your rest depends upon the length of time you can augment your flight duty. So if you get a good, nice flat bed seat to sleep on, that's the best deal, and you can get quite a few hours extra flight duty for that. But if you're in a economy sit-up and beg seat, then the amount you can extend your flight duty is much reduced, because you're not getting obviously good quality rest in order to be able to work for the entire flight. So what's happened is Qantas have reallocated this aircraft without crew rest facilities and put it on ultra long haul or long haul. I'm not quite sure what routes they're on. And they're saying, okay, well, we'll block off some seats, which actually damages the airline because they can't sell those to passengers now. So those seats have to be available for the crew. And they don't have the privacy curtains. And it's pretty uncomfortable, even if you've got a mattress to lay down over 4 seats, compared with a proper lie flat bed or a bunk, which is the normal crew rest for the crew. So this is very much an ad hoc measure. The fact that you couldn't shut the lights off is actually relatively common on aircraft. Those computerized systems, which do all the fancy lights, they do have a tendency to perhaps they're powered by Microsoft, to stop working at times.
Yeah.
And I've been on been on flights where the lights are just stuck on full bright the whole way.
Right.
And if you're trying to take crew rest, that's pretty tough. So that seems to be what's generated this story, that the crew were trying to put blankets up just so they could get some decent shut-eye. But it sounds to me like the airline were ill-prepared to put these aircraft onto a long-haul route and just didn't have the proper facilities on board.
And I genuinely feel quite sorry for the cabin crew here trying to get some rest.
Oh yeah,
you know?
it's
I
awful.
mean,
If you're just cabin crew sitting in a seat trying to get some crew rest or whatever, passengers don't know what the system is. They'll come and shake you awake and ask for a cup of coffee or whatever.
Absolutely.
If you're in the aircraft cabin, which is why it's so important. If you want to have well-rested cabin crew to do their important duties for the entire flight, you've got to give them decent crew rest.
Yeah, absolutely. It's as you say, not an ideal situation.
No.
At all. It's. I mean, anything to add to that, Andy?
No, obviously this is not something that I come across at work.
No, true. I'll give you that.
I can't even imagine how awful it is to have to lie down in seats like that with a blanket over you and have passengers hassling life out of you. There is a reason why I work behind a locked bulletproof door just in front of the person. Because I would be sacked within minutes of being cabin crew.
Right, yeah.
And I couldn't do the job. I couldn't do it. And I have a lot of respect for them. So this is
indeed
not the nicest way to rest.
Absolutely not. Yeah. Okay, all right. Well, thanks for your comments on all of those stories, guys. It's
Matt,
yeah. Go on.
Before you move on, you've got to open it.
Okay, right.
I've
Go on.
sent
Do you want to tell the
Yeah.
story then on this? Go on.
So when Matt and Carlos asked me to be on tonight, I suddenly remembered that I had something in the house from 2019.
2019?
I was meant to give to Matt. Yeah, I've had it for a long time. Okay. In fact, I've moved 3 houses with it.
Have you? Right.
Yeah, and I thought, right, I'm going to send it down to him now. It's something that you need.
Okay.
And we'll help you out on this show a lot.
Oh, no. Right. Okay, here we go. All right, so, yes, there we go.
What is it, a loaded revolver?
Yeah. Charmed. Thanks, Nick.
Just shoot the unruly guests.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Doesn't work when they're all remote nowadays.
That's true.
I stay at the other ends of the country from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're not daft. Okay, I'm having a little trouble getting in, I'll be honest.
I've just said the actress to the bishop.
Quite. Hang on. Here we go.
There you go. That's the bit you want to pull.
Ah, there we go.
Here we go.
Oh, no.
Oh, it's got an aeroplane on it.
It has.
Oh, I love it. It says on it, here we go. Let me hold that up to the camera. There
Civil
you go.
Aircraft Recognition Book.
Right.
There'll be a test, presumably, Andy.
Right,
Yeah,
okay. How
Yes,
long?
he's got 3 weeks.
I've got 3 weeks to study.
You're generous. Wow.
Oh, wow,
And
okay.
And you might be able to do well at the Christmas quiz this year or something.
Right,
like that.
yeah, that's true. Okay, Lithuania. Well, I've heard of one of the airlines in here so far. That's good.
It's not airlines, it's aircraft.
Aircraft, right. The word boing seems to be appearing quite a lot. That's quite nice. Oh, wow. This is really quite cool. This is actually quite cool.
Well, there
I
you
like
go.
This. I shall have a thumb through of this. There's a Cessna. The only Cessnas I've ever seen are not that big.
That's a proper one.
That's a grown-up one, is it? Oh, well, thank
Well,
you,
there you
Andy.
go. I'm glad I finally got it to you.
Yeah, that'll keep me amused for a little while, won't it?
No more excuses now when you don't know what the aircraft is. Pull your book out.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to have to go and do some significant research. Okay. We're going to, unfortunately, we have lost Armando now, but we're going to plot on. We're going to do 3 of the military stories that he has put in there for us. So if everybody is ready, we'll get stuck in, shall we?
You bet.
What's up, Buggies 135, 50, Angel 16, heading 340. Okay. 100 St. Buggy.
Okay, and our first story, Andy, is with you.
Yes, and this is from thedrive.com. It's RC-135 jets flew unprecedented mission to spy on Russia's new ICBM. In a highly unusual move, a pair of US Air Force RC-135S Cobra Ball intelligence-gathering aircraft flew together towards the east coast of Russia today. The reason for the two-aircraft mission was the first full-scale test launch of Russia's new RS-28 Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile, one of the 6 super weapons that were showcased by President Vladimir Putin back in March 2018. The two RC-135S aircraft, serial numbers 62-4128 and 61-2663, launched from Elson Air Force Base in Alaska, I've probably got that wrong, earlier today, and apparently flew in formation towards Russia's far east coast. Online flight tracking software shows the aircraft close to St. Matthew Island, a remote uninhabited outpost of Alaska in the Bering Sea. The two Cobra Balls were observing the Sarmat's multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicle, MIRV, test warheads as they returned to Earth on a designated area at the Kura Proving Ground on the, Kamchatka Peninsula in the Russian Far East. Typically, the Cobra Ball would take up station closer to the Russian coast with an orbit area off Kailuchi, also on the Kamchatka Peninsula. It's possible, therefore, that the two RC-135S aircraft today were caught short, with re-entry occurring before the jets reached their planned station. The War Zone spoke to Robert S. Hopkins III, an independent scholar and aviation historian, and a former Air Force pilot with experience flying 17 different C-135 subvariants, including both the RC-135S Cobra Ball aircraft involved today, to get a better understanding of the rarity of this mission. The immediate conclusion of today's flights to be that US intelligence officials were so desperate to collect data on this particular first-of-its-kind ICBM test that they sent 2 aircraft to monitor it. As Hopkins confirmed, however, having 2 aircraft in the air at the same time could also have other benefits. For one, the Cobra Balls could have been collecting data at different altitudes to cover the ICBM's re-entry. Also, it may have been a case of testing new equipment with different fits on each aircraft. There's also a potentially more mundane explanation for the 2-ship Cobra Ball mission. It could be the case that the primary RC-135S had a tech problem, which meant the ground spare was launched instead. Then, once the primary jet was flight ready, it took off too and joined the spare in the same area. As to the capabilities that the RC-135S brings to this kind of mission, and has done since the Cold War, this is a topic that we have covered previously, including, they've gone to say other stories that they've got in their collection there.
Okay. Yeah, no, fair enough.
So 2 snoopers snooping.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They've been doing this since, the very first Russian nuclear weapons were being detonated. These aircraft do a remarkable job. So I suspect they've got much more sophisticated equipment than they did in the early days. But it's a tricky job because you have to sneak up to the Russians and stay in international airspace and yet still monitor their test. So take your hats off to them.
Yeah.
Spy planes are still going.
Still going stronger. We're talking drones next, Nick. Military drones, to be precise.
So do you want me to drone along with this?
Let's see what you
This
did
is
there,
from thedrive.com. So it's the V247 tilt rotor drone, downsized for strike roll aboard Navy ships. So Bell, they make motorcycle helmets, don't they? Has
Probably, yes.
resurrected the unmanned V247 Vigilant, designed for the Marine Corps, and scaled it down for use as a strike and surveillance aircraft aboard Navy ships, where the autonomous tilt rotor can fit in the same space as an MH-60R, about the same size as my Audi, I think, and perform any of the manned helicopter missions. No, seriously, I have no idea what that MH-60R is. Anyone know?
No, I heard this is where we miss Armando, of course.
Yeah, we could have done with some dimensions here, Matt. Designed as a contender for the Marine Air Ground Task Force Unmanned Aerial System Experimental, or MUX program, Bell's V247 247 Vigilant is now on offer to the larger sea service for the future vertical lift maritime strike development effort. That called for shaving several £1,000s from the aircraft's fuselage and a right sizing, which I think is cutting down to the appropriate dimensions, the rotor blades, nacelles and other elements of the aircraft to meet Navy requirements. Todd Warden, Bell's Senior Manager for Advanced Lift, Vertical Lift Systems and Strategy, told the Warzone. That was a large aircraft that could do a whole lot of missions, Warden said of Mux. A lot of them were very difficult to do, but we sized the 247 to meet those missions. It had a different set of missions, and we re-evaluated how big the aircraft was and were able to right-size the aircraft.
They like that phrase, don't they?
It's like going for a new suit. Would you like the right size, sir?
If you wouldn't
No,
mind, yes.
give me one that's twice the size I need. Right-size the aircraft for the Navy. What that did was made the compatibility with the cruiser, the destroyers, that much better by getting right. They made it fit more ships.
Okay,
guys.
good, lively.
So now it's very comparable to an aircraft that's currently embarked on those service combatants, the 60 Romeo. So they seem to have trimmed down this this drone successfully, and it's still doing lots of missions. The original design was for a gross weight of £30,000, and it was downsized to £28,000. So they knocked £2,000 off it. Perhaps leaving the pilot out because it's a drone.
Yeah.
You don't need a pilot for.
Well, quite.
Yeah. An MH60R, by comparison, has a maximum gross weight of 23,500.
And that's a Sikorsky
considerably small.
Seahawk. There you go, if you want to know.
Ah, okay.
Oh, well, there you
Ooh,
go.
hello. That was unexpected.
It's called Google.
Oh, I see. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So long story short, it's a drone. It's been cut down in size, and so it's compatible with more aircraft and other bits and pieces.
I tell you what, it's got an interesting list of capabilities, though.
Yeah.
It is intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and targeting. Surface warfare, so presumably it can fire missiles.
Okay.
Anti-submarine warfare, so presumably it can drop sonar buoys and or fire torpedoes. Mine countermeasures, so it must have some
Sort of
mine
sweeping
detecting equipment. Air warfare, I'm not quite sure how it does that. Wow. Electronic warfare, search and rescue. Wow. And how does a drone do search and rescue? That's incredible.
Cameras, I guess, and sort of infrared and all
Command
that.
and control will be, feeding intelligence back to the boys sitting in the ship. And SOF support.
I mean, I suppose essentially this thing is being flown by a human of some description with computer support, but nevertheless somebody is essentially looking at the cameras as the eyes, if you like, watching what's going on, I suppose.
Where'd you put someone once you've rescued them? You just drag them behind you in the water.
Yeah, I think
they dangle underneath on the wire.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, keep them busy, sort of. Yeah,
You only want to rescue one at a time, or they bang together like
quite,
conkers.
absolutely, yeah, indeed. But a fascinating bit of kit. As I say, I think this is the way everything's going, isn't it? I think there's more and more of this is going to be people not actually in aircraft and being flown remotely doing a lot of these activities. I think.
Yeah, that reflects the price of them as well, because some of these drones are inordinately expensive.
Almost as much as an actual aeroplane.
Well,
Maybe
yes.
not quite that, but okay. Well, we'll move on then to the last story in the military for this week. This is warbirdnews.com is where this is coming from, and it's the Wasp 80th anniversary homecoming celebration and family reunion. 2022 marks the 80th year of the Women Air Force Service Pilots, Wasp. The quasi-military? Is that correct? Quasi-military organisation which trained...
Semi would be an alternative word.
Hello, I appear to have set off my Google. I do apologise. the quasi-military organisation which trained women to fly, test aircraft and train other pilots during World War II. The programme traces its roots to a pair of smaller units formed in September 1942. As part of their efforts to celebrate this major anniversary, the National Wasp World War II Museum is holding a special event over April 29th, 30th or in 2022 at the Avenger Field at the base in Sweetwater, Texas, where many of the Wasps underwent their training. To honour America's first females to fly military aircraft, the museum is recreating a wartime party scene complete with Wasp reenactors, a live swing band, good food, and best of all, aircraft. The flight line will once again host the training aircraft the Wasp flew, including 11 BT-13s and many other wonderful World War II era birds, including the B-25 and the DC-3. All female crews will also be in attendance alongside their US Air Force, Army, Marine Corps and Navy aircraft. Visitors will enjoy many other activities, including the opening of a permanent exhibit describing the American history of black pilots, curated by historian Monica Smith, and a special temporary exhibit on John and Marie Clark, B-17 and Wasp pilots respectively, courtesy of the Yankee Air Museum. Other activities during the two-day celebration will include author signings, special conversations and the cadet zone. Saturday's fly-in and activities are free, while Friday's dinner and dance fundraiser is a ticketed event to raise money for all new exhibits in Hangar 2, a hangar dating from 1929, which formed part of the Sweetwater's first airport. If you want more information on this event, or if you are in Texas or heading to Texas and would like to purchase some tickets or learn more information about Hangar 2 renovations, go to their website. It is www.waspmuseum.org. That's Wasp Museum, all one word, .org. And it's some of the photos and stuff that I've got here of it, it looks like it's going to be a great event. I love anything like this. I love the history of this sort of thing. As you well know, Nick, as I say, it's one of the nicest pleasures I've ever had is wandering around some of the bases that we've been. Like Goodwood, I think, was a particularly memorable visit with you, actually. It's sort of, I think it was, I'm trying to remember where we went, near where the, because there was an airfield, wasn't there, nearby where we went for the tea rooms and...
There is. Goodwood is an airfield and a motor racing circuit, so you get the best of both worlds.
Absolutely. Yeah. Although no racing when we were there, unfortunately. But
so that is the Vultee. You just showed a picture of one there. Which is that kind of B-17 trainer, a 13 trainer.
Yeah.
And the other aircraft you mentioned was the B-25 Mitchell, which you had on a little earlier as well.
Yeah, it's a great event. If you're in the area, obviously, I would recommend going if you can. Well, there we go.
That looks like one of the originals.
It does, doesn't it? Look at that. Oh, hello. What we got there? Or have I gone round? I don't know. Oh, that was from the
Skyhawk.
That was the other story. Sorry, we're not doing that one now. Well, there we go. That is the military done. Well done, everyone. We survived.
Cool. And I should think so too.
Absolutely.
Cheeky rat.
I know. And that's where we bring episode number 408 to a close. My personal thanks to Nick and Andy for joining me today. As I say, Carlos is on the radio at the moment. That's why he's not here. And obviously Armando is now flying. Nev is actually travelling back from Norwich as we speak, which is why he wasn't able to join us. And that's pretty much it for this week's show. Got anything exciting in your calendar for next week, Nick?
Well, the bowling season started. So, I'm getting out onto the green and commencing bowling. And I don't think so. I'm struggling to think of a subject for a plain tale, so that'll be my next job.
Excellent. Sounds good to me. So I presume a full schedule of flying is in the order of the day for you, Andy?
Yes, well, today was day one, and that was spent in my office doing work.
Okay, that went well.
Then the rest of the week, it's Santorini tomorrow, Antalya the day after, Tenerife the day after that.
Wow.
So busy. Then hopefully some cricket next week.
Some cricket.
to watch. Not
Oh, I
play.
see. Right, I was going to say. What?
No, cricket today at the pub with something to watch.
Indeed. Oh well, there it is.
Who's playing?
I'll be Durham.
Oh, a bit of county cricket. Yeah.
Yes. The home of the Pink Panther.
Yes.
See what he did there. Okay, as I say, well, thanks very much for joining me, guys, and for seeing me through
Always
this.
pleasure.
And yeah, that's it from us. Take care, everyone, and we will see you bright and breezy next week. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Cheers, everybody.